This is going to be a reaction video to a new guilty pleasure of ours, Food Wars, which is an anime about cooking, which we have come to really enjoy, and it's got some interesting mental health, anxiety related stuff in it, so we thought it'd be a really cool thing to jump on and give some commentary on this. This is in the Japanese, but we are really excited to watch this and explain what's going on in terms of the character's psychology.
You just got to get past the ultra sexual reactions to the food, but food can be quite sensual, so it makes a bit of sense, I think.
Because this is a PG channel, we'll probably cut those bits out, so if you are going to watch it, just be aware that is part of the show. But we've been really enjoying it, so let's go.
すごかったよね。あの時食べたどの料理も。それでこの授業では生徒から一人助手を募ることになっている。調理のサポートをしてもらうんだ。誰か立候補したい人はいますか?
So firstly, they're really intimidated that he's the top student in the whole school.
They're negatively comparing themselves
with him. And it's interesting because it's how you see it. You know, they're seeing it as scary to be learning from him. And that's one way of seeing it. You could also see it as exciting. That you get to learn from someone who's really good, and then now he's asking for an assistant, and everyone's freaking out.
Yeah, and I mean that's fairly normal as far as general humans' normative anxiety goes.
Yeah.
Like in a high pressure classroom situation like this, that's a fairly normal reaction. That's not to say it's helpful. I mean, it's going to inhibit their growth, right?
Yeah.
However, it is pretty normal.
Yeah, holding yourself back from those sort of experiences is going to limit the amount you learn as well.
I mean, they're thinking like, oh, I'm going to make a fool of myself up there. It's going to be really embarrassing, that kind of thing. Right?
And thinking I'm not going to be able to do this. And all of those thoughts are actually going to be self-reinforcing. It's going to be putting them in a state where they're not able to take as much information in that anxiety state. Understandable in this situation, especially because it's a really high pressure environment.
Super high pressure.
So high pressure, but and it's not incredibly helpful.
No.
Yeah. Cool.
They're already anticipating how they'll feel. Ta-da! Soma to the rescue. Didn't even know.
So this is the interesting thing about Soma is he's such an anxiety master in that he sees the opportunity rather than the threat. So he goes, oh my goodness, this guy is so good. I want to be his assistant. I want to learn from him. I'm going to jump in there and do this.
He's
That'd
not
be awesome.
thinking about failure. He's only thinking about enjoying himself and improving his own cooking.
Yeah, which is a really great way to view the world. And he's a great example of when you can master anxiety and you can use that energy for excitement and passion and to push you forward. And he's really doing that in this situation, and he's doing something quite unusual to be able to put himself forward in that way, especially in quite a high pressure environment. But it's so great because he actually gets to learn and improve and grow, and he can enjoy the experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. 披露するのはフランス料理のアミューズ5品だ。同時進行で調理していく。雪平には下ごしらえからこなしてもらう。よし。では調理開始だ。雪平、まずセミドライイチジクをフードプロセッサーでクネル状に。エシャロットはアッシェ、人参はジュリエンヌ。卵黄と砂糖にカルダモンパウダーと牛乳を加えてアングレーズを炊き、冷ましたからソルベティエールにかけてくれ。合点。
Okay, that's kind of at the limits of, I mean, that's like 8 things to remember, which is pushing his working memory a bit. But the issue that's really coming up for the rest of the members in the class there is that they're busy thinking other thoughts. So they're going, oh, I can't remember that, and oh, that's way too many. And those thoughts, those bits of language are going to add into the working memory load and make it harder for them to remember. So there's no way they're going to be able to remember all 8 bits of information there, that list of things to do. And so that's interfering there for them, whereas Soma is only thinking about that list of things. Plus he's had experience doing a similar thing, so he's going to be able to chunk those down because of his experience with French cooking before.
We a great thing that Brené Brown came up with is talking about effing first times, and these, in almost every situation where something's the first time you've done it, it's going to be more difficult. It's going to be more challenging. The thing that they don't know about Soma is that he's already had experience working in a really high pace French restaurant, and so for him, he's not thinking about the individual things. He knows those recipes, or he knows similar recipes, and so he's using his past experience, which makes it so much easier for him to know what to do. And so the difficulty with anxiety is often you'll see somebody else calm, confident, and you'll assume it's just because they're better than you or whatever, but you don't necessarily know what their experience is, and we can make assumptions that are very negative towards ourselves. But in this situation, he has that experience, and there's confidence from experience, but he had to put himself out there and risk failure and being ridiculed and things to learn this and to go through that thing. But it really pays off to expose yourself to new and difficult situations, because then you have the opportunity to do this. A small story myself is I really struggle with reading things out loud, and I was in a classroom and my teacher asked me to get up and read a passage out loud. And I had this kind of freak out moment, and then I looked down and I realized I did speech and drama, and it was one of the passages that I'd learnt by heart. And it was one of those most amazing moments when I went, I know all the words! I don't have to read this off by heart. I can read this off the paper. I can read it by heart. And to the rest of my class, I just fluently and expressively did this amazing passage. But what they didn't know was that I actually had past experience of doing that. So when you see somebody do something magnificently, you don't know what's gone into getting to them to that point. So it's best not to judge in those situations, and especially not judge yourself.
Yeah, instead just focus on what you can learn, what you can enjoy in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Anticipating his needs based on his experience.
Yeah.
Not afraid to communicate, he's not being passive.
So this guy's unhelpful as a teacher, because he's not taking into account the fact that he has all this experience, and he doesn't realize that Soma has all that experience as well, and to then put it onto the class that everyone else should be able to do it at what him and Soma can do with all their experience. That's a bit unrealistic, and it's quite unhelpful when people put unrealistic expectations on us. You know, when it's our first time, we're not going to be as fast, we're not necessarily going to get everything right. So I can see why the class is just
looking really depressed.
Really depressed and thoughtful, because he's setting them up to fail in this situation. Yeah.
Meanwhile, in Erina's class.
Yeah. So this is interesting, another character, swapping to another character who from the start has sort of portrayed a lot of confidence, but actually doesn't have the sort of inner strength that someone like Soma has, and she's actually been hiding from her father, who's just recently come back, quite an abusive person, and she's scared that if she shows her face that he will kind of take her away and lock her away, type thing. So, but in this situation she's getting exposure, so she's actually going to her classes that she's been avoiding, and she's find that it's not actually what she thought it was going to be. So it's a good example of somebody getting out of their comfort zone and getting some exposure. There can be times where we can get a bit trapped by staying at home and avoiding going out and avoid going to classes because we're scared of what teachers might think of us if we've been missing some classes or something like that, and it's really good to get back into it and challenge those assumptions.
They seem to make it through okay.
いやー、余裕ってほどでもなかったかもな。セントラルのレベルもなかなか。冷静に考えたらセントラル手つけたようなもんじゃねえか。
Got so caught up, we didn't even realize.
I think that's a really good example of how someone doesn't overthink things. He just enjoys things. He gets involved. So yeah, there's this sort of conflict within the school between how different people want to run things in terms of cooking, and he's just helped out someone on the opposite side. But sometimes it can be a bit arbitrary doing that, and it can be really unhelpful, kind of creating an us and them thing. But I think it's really funny that he hadn't even thought about it. He's just thinking about enjoying cooking and getting it into it. And I think it's interesting, he said, I wouldn't say with ease. And I think the reason he's saying that is because it didn't come easy to him. He actually worked through a lot, like we were talking about earlier, to get him to that point. Yeah. Cool.
マジか。司先輩まだいたんすか。いやー、実習が終わったら一気に緊張が解けて力が抜けちゃってね。本当に参ったよ。大勢の生徒が見てる前で調理をしてみせろなんて。万が一大事なことを伝え忘れたりしたらと思うとさ。はあ、こうやって弱音吐いてるとまた林道に怒られるかな。究極の完璧主義って。
So this is interesting because he comes across, he's very competent at cooking, and he came across reasonably confident except for that moment when he's like, okay, no one wants to assist me, what do I do now, type thing.
He's really confident with his food.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the interesting thing about confidence, right? We often talk about it as this global thing, like, is this person confident? Am I confident? Do I have confidence, right? But actually, it's in individual things, right? So like confidence is in particular abilities, right? So it's whether we predict it going a particular way, right? You could have confidence about failing, right? You could be like, I'm confident that I will suck at this, right? You have confidence, right? It's the level of predictive power, right?
Yeah.
Think of it like in science, right? Like a confidence interval. It's the amount of confidence that you have that your chosen prediction will turn out that way.
So we're thinking more about positive. So in terms of like, it seems like he has positive confidence and he actually has negative confidence about the negative things possibly happening.
Well, it seems to be about, like Soma said, he's a perfectionist here. It seems to be he's got high expectations of getting this, and this all done, all right? Like I needed to make sure I say everything that I need to say to the class. I might have forgotten something.
Yeah.
He's holding himself to this high expectation and then is worried that he hasn't met that. But it seems to be around everything except food.
Yeah. So,
cooking.
yeah. It's interesting, in contrast, how Soma can have confidence to put himself forward for things, even when he might fail or he's not as good as the other person.
I think he views failure differently, defines it differently.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, he sees it as learning experiences and growth and enjoyment and stuff. So that really helps with him. But yeah, it's interesting seeing this guy's anxiety now. Is that social anxiety, performance anxiety? He's saying it's perfectionism. Where would you class the anxiety he's having? Generalized anxiety?
Well, in this particular situation, it's looking like social performance anxiety, and he's worried about having his performance judged by by this lass here as well, but also of the effect on the students. But he's not talking about how they might think of him as a person necessarily, or in a social situation that isn't a performance situation.
Right, yeah.
It seems to be like in another episode he was doing a presentation to the school, and he was anxious about that. That's another performance situation.
Right, yeah.
This teaching in class is performance. I mean, even how she'll judge his performance, that's all performance based. But he doesn't get it with the performance of his cooking.
Well, it's interesting when he's cooking, he's so mindful of the cooking.
True.
He's so in the moment with what
Communing
he's
with it,
doing. That being in the present, he's not worrying about things he's previously done or predicting negative things that could happen in the future.
Well, also he has positive confidence. He's confident that people will really enjoy the cooking.
Yeah, from experience.
So you can have specific areas of confidence. We talk about having a general sense, or we feel generally confident when we have quite a few key areas in our lives that we're confident that we can do well in.
Yeah, and we also often see ourselves as not having confidence, even if there's just one area that we feel really low confidence in, and it affects our functioning. So if we're quite highly socially anxious, or we have intense panic in certain situations, then we might see ourselves as low confidence because of that. It can overshadow the other areas which we do have confidence in. Cool. Okay.
しかし素晴らしかったよ、雪平。思ってた以上にいい腕してるんだな。いや、俺も楽しかったし、勉強になりましたわ。使える男だ。俺の懐刀になるつもりはないか。セントラルに入らないか。え？
I think it was really interesting just back there where he said that I had fun and I learned a lot.
Yeah, his two focuses.
Like, it's interesting because the way we interpret a learning experience, we can interpret as, if I'm learning that I don't know it already, that means I'm not good enough. We can go in that sphere, but to go what I don't know and I'm learning is like fun, is excitement and interesting and new, is not dangerous, it's fun. It's interesting, the different approach. So someone who's got a mastery over anxiety sees the world in a different way, reframes things so that they can get enjoyment out of things that other people would deem as scary and intimidating.
Because I mean, you can be confident that you'll learn, and so you're focusing on that. You're completely ignoring whether you have any confidence in being able to do it well or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
今まで私はお父様の言うことを何の疑問も持たず聞いてきたわ。そうすること以外考えもしなかった。従うことが当たり前だと思っていたからよ。でも雪平君や極星寮のみんなは自分を曲げずお父様に屈しなかった。そしてアリスはあのお父様に面と向かって怒りを伝えた。そんな姿を見ていたら私、ハサミおじ様に見せつけなきゃダメ。自分は自分なのだと私も思うようになったのよ。私自身は
This is the interesting thing. Sometimes we feel like we need to get exposure to everything, but also seeing other people doing things that we find scary or think horrible negative things would happen, even just watching somebody else go through an experience can be a good way to get exposure. So she's seeing people standing up to her abusive father, and that's giving her the confidence that actually maybe I could do that too. And I think it's really good to model to other people. It's really great that they're there as an example to her that you can challenge that authority, and that they can choose to do what they want to do. She just didn't question that, she'd just have to obey, and so it's good. It's giving her that experience of something different.
本当はどうしたいのだろうって。エリナ様、別にアリスや雪平君の影響を受けたわけではありませんからね。私はただ自分の意思で雪平だから雪平君は何も関係ない。司さんと雪平君、どうしてあの二人が。どうしたんですかエリナ様。なぜ隠れるのです。なぜかしら。
俺にセントラルに入れって言ったんですか。ああ、冗談きついっすよ司先輩。 なんで俺がそんなことは。そっか、やっぱりダメか。いや、そこまで落ち込むことないじゃないですか。まあ、俺の腕を認めてくれたっていうの。
I think that's funny. Like, he's like, you should join Central. And he's like, why would I do that? That's a bad joke. And he's like, it is a bad joke.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I didn't think of it that way. Or, yeah.
A bit of a negative view of himself. And
Yes. Yeah. It's a bit. He can slip easily into those negative self-thoughts, a bit of depressed mood.
Especially when it's any sort of communication between people with that social performance anxiety.
Yeah, well, that one's looking a bit more social than performance, because that's not a performance situation.
Yeah, true.
That's just them interacting.
Yeah.
まあ正直嬉しいっすけどな。でも雪平の料理をセントラルで披露するつもりにはなれないんで。ああ、それはいらない。雪平の料理はいらない。俺が欲しいと思ったのは君のサポート能力なんだよ。雪平がいてくれたら俺の料理は今以上に研ぎ澄まされると思うんだよね。そんなわけだからもう一回考えてくれると嬉しいんだけど、俺の料理のために
For my cooking's sake.
涼しい顔してすげえわがまま言ってくれますね。まったく料理人って人種はどいつもこいつも自分勝手で困るぜ。
ナキリさん、アラトさん、何してるの？早くかけろ。
雪平にも利点はある。セントラルに入って俺と組めば今よりもっと上のフィールドで活躍できるんだよ。でもそれは司先輩のサポートとしてだけっすよね。俺の料理が出せなきゃ全然意味ないんで。そっか。本当に自分の料理のことしか考えてねえんすね。
It's interesting here. He's talking about the selfishness of this person by going, I'm so amazing at cooking that you should just be my assistant and not do any of your own cooking, not thinking about the fact that maybe he wants to do his own type of cooking. And I think sometimes though with anxiety, rather than selfishness, there is a bit of a self-focus, intense focus on yourself and the things that you are doing and things. In this case, I think there's a certain, in this case there's a certain amount of arrogance that kind of blinds him to the fact that there are other people out there who are doing cooking as well.
Yeah, well, I guess that self-focus is probably a less loaded way of putting it. I mean, humans do that. We all think first about ourselves. It's just not usually this blatant, where he's obviously just thinking about that and talking about it like that.
Yeah.
But then you can see that it's not that he's always like that, because as soon as Soma points that out, he's like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's right. Like,
that sort of awareness. It comes and goes. His awareness seems to come and go.
Which makes him a more dynamic character.
It's interesting how confidently Soma just pulls him up on it though.
Yeah.
It's just like, why would I want to do that? You're saying some selfish things. It's in a pretty like just by and by way.
Yeah, and that's part of Soma's character too, is just saying things fairly blatantly, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's quite refreshing.
Yeah.
だいたい司先輩って俺の皿一回も見たことないっすよね。もしかしたら俺の方が料理の腕は上かもしれないじゃないっすか。なるほど。なら試してみようか。どちらの腕がより上なのか。俺でよければ今ここで相手をしてやってもいいぜ。十傑第一席の座をかけて。
Well, that was a bit of an excerpt from reaction to season 3 of Food Wars. It's an interesting show with some really dynamic characters, and I think the cool thing about anime is because the characters are quite heightened, everything's really dramatic, it's a heightened way of showing anxiety as well, and so it's a bit easier to see in there, and good for kind of questioning and discussion. So we really hope you enjoyed this. We love anime, and we've guilty pleasure love this show, and so it was really fun to be able to share this with you. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and comment on any videos you would like us to review next. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much for watching.